It was a cold, snowy Christmas Eve when I made the decision to take the train. I wasn't looking forward to the usual holiday rush. The crowded rooms, the endless chatter, the forced cheer. It was the first Christmas I had spent alone in years, and I wanted it to stay quiet. My family had all gone their separate ways, and I just wanted to disappear for a while. The idea of taking a train at night, heading into the empty countryside, seemed like the perfect escape. When I arrived at the station, it was eerily empty. Snow fell steadily, turning the ground into a thick, silent blanket of white. The faint yellow glow of the station lights reflected off the flakes, casting everything in a dull, lonely glow. Then I noticed something strange. There was only one train sitting on the tracks. It wasn't a modern one either. It looked ancient, something out of another time. Dark wooden carriages, brass handles, faded gold trim. It looked like it belonged in an old black and white photograph. A tall, thin conductor stood at the entrance, his face pale and hollow, his expression empty. He didn't greet me, just gave a slow nod, like he had seen me 1,000 times before. His dark uniform looked out of place in the modern world, like a ghost from the past. Something about him unsettled me, but I ignored it, telling myself it was just the stillness of the night. I boarded the train. The car was empty except for a few scattered bags. The soft creak of the metal echoed through the silence. I found a seat by the window and pulled my scarf tighter, watching the snow pile against the platform. The train shuddered, then began to move. As we pulled away from the station, I watched the lights fade until nothing was left but the endless white of snow-covered fields. The rhythmic hum of the wheels became almost hypnotic, lulling me into a false sense of calm. For a while it was peaceful, until I realized something wasn't right. It wasn't just the silence. It was something else. A feeling, like I wasn't alone. The conductor had vanished into the back car, leaving me completely isolated. An hour passed, maybe more. The outside world was empty. No cars, no houses, not even a flicker of light in the distance. It felt like we were traveling through a frozen world, untouched by life. Then I heard it. A faint tapping. At first I thought it was the wind or the shifting of the train, but it came again. Soft, rhythmic, like someone lightly tapping on the glass beside me. I froze. My breath fogged up the window as I leaned forward, but there was nothing there. The sound stopped, leaving behind a thick silence that made my heart pound. Then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. I stood, scanning the car. Empty. But the air felt colder, heavier, like it was filled with something unseen. A chill swept through the car. The heater flickered, then died. My fingers went numb as I tried to pull my coat tighter. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. A shadow, small and hunched, darting across the far end of the carriage. I blinked, but it was gone. My mind raced, telling me it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The tapping turned to scratching, nails dragging along the metal walls, slow and deliberate. My pulse quickened. The sound of the train itself seemed muffled now, as though we were gliding through fog instead of air. Then the conductor appeared again at the far end of the car, holding something I couldn't make out. He didn't look at me. He didn't speak. He just walked past silently, his footsteps making no sound on the wooden floor. That's when I noticed it. A compartment door at the very end of the car, one I hadn't seen before. It was slightly open, and from inside came a faint noise. At first it sounded like the train's movement, but as I listened I realized it was something else. A slow, deliberate shuffle. I hesitated, then walked toward it. The closer I got, the colder the air became. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. The noise stopped. I opened the door. Inside, the compartment was empty. Dust coated every surface, except for an old suitcase lying in the center of the floor. I knelt down, curiosity overpowering fear, and opened it. Inside was a single cracked Christmas mask. Its paint was peeling, its grin twisted, its hollow black eyes staring back at me. A rotten smell hit me and I quickly slammed the suitcase shut. I turned to leave, but the door behind me had closed. I pulled at the handle. It didn't move. My breath quickened as panic took hold. Then I heard it again. the tapping, but now it was coming from inside the compartment. Tap, tap, tap. My stomach dropped. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was right beside me. Then from the corner of my eye I saw movement. A figure, small, childlike, emerged from the shadows. Its head tilted slightly, and on its face was that same cracked mask from the suitcase. Its grin was unnatural, too wide, and its eyes were black voids that swallowed the light. I stumbled backward, slamming into the door, which suddenly flew open on its own. I fell into the corridor and ran. When the train finally stopped, I bolted through the nearest door and out into the freezing night. The snow was falling hard, the air sharp and still. I turned to look back and froze. The train was gone. The platform was empty. The tracks were empty. Nothing but falling snow and silence. I don't remember how I got home that night. I just remember the sound, the tapping that still echoes in my head. Every Christmas Eve when the snow begins to fall, I hear it faintly again. Tap, tap, tap. And I can't help but wonder, was that train ever real? Or is it still out there, waiting for me to board once more? If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? It was Christmas Eve, and I was running late for my flight. The snow had started falling harder than usual, and the roads were slick, turning my usual route to the airport into a nightmare. I had to catch the last train out of town to make my flight on time, or I'd be stranded until morning. I didn't even want to think about that possibility. I reached the station just in time. The platform was nearly empty and the train waiting there looked wrong. It wasn't the modern kind I usually took. This one was older, almost antique, the kind of train you'd expect to see in a museum, or maybe in a horror movie. But I didn't have the luxury to think too much about it. The icy wind howled through the deserted platform as I hurried inside. The conductor caught my attention immediately. He wasn't the friendly face I was used to seeing on my regular commute. This man looked ancient, his face sharp, weathered, and exhausted, as if time itself had worn him down. His dark uniform looked faded and dirty, like it hadn't been washed in years. Inside, the train smelled of old wood and something faintly musty. The seats were covered in peeling velvet, their color long gone. A few passengers sat scattered across the car, but no one spoke. The silence was thick, uncomfortable. I took a seat by the window and watched the snow outside grow heavier, blanketing everything in white. As the train lurched forward and began to move out of the city, I heard it. A child's cry. It wasn't loud, just a soft, muffled sob. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then it came again. Faint, distant, like it was coming from the back of the train. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't stop. The crying grew louder, steadier, desperate. I glanced around. None of the passengers seemed to notice. Or maybe they were pretending not to. Finally, I stood up and walked toward the sound. My footsteps echoed through the quiet car as I moved closer to the rear. Then, in the dim light ahead, I saw a shadow move. My pulse quickened. Turning the corner, I froze. There, by the door to the next car, stood a small figure, a child. She stared at me, pale, wide-eyed, clutching a tattered little doll. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. She just stared, her eyes glassy and empty like she didn't even hear me. A cold draft swept through the train, chilling me to the bone. Her dress caught my eye. Old-fashioned, something from another era. She didn't belong here. None of this felt right. Then the crying began again, louder now. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many. A chorus of sobbing children echoed through the car surrounding me, pressing in from every direction. The girl turned without a word and began to walk toward the next car. Instinctively, I reached out, but before I could touch her, she vanished through the door. Panicked, I rushed after her, but the next car was completely empty. The crying grew deafening, twisted, distorted. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Suddenly I felt it, and a cold hand gripping my arm. I spun around. No one was there. The train began to shake violently. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. And then, silence. The train screeched to a stop. I fell forward, catching myself on the seat, and looked around. The passengers were gone, every single one. Only the child remained. She stood at the far end of the car, her back to me. Slowly, I walked toward her, my legs trembling. When I was just a few feet away, she turned. Her eyes were black, not dark, black. Empty voids that seemed to pull me in. The doors hissed open behind me. Without thinking, I stepped out into the snow. When I turned back, the train was gone. The platform was empty, silent. I don't remember how I got home that night. But every Christmas Eve since then, I still hear the faint sound of children crying in the distance. And I wonder, was the Midnight Express real? Or just a nightmare I'll never escape? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that are real. It was the kind of Christmas Eve that looked straight out of a postcard. Snow was falling in soft, fluffy sheets, covering the streets in a thick blanket of white. I was on my way home, taking the last train of the evening after a long, exhausting day at work. All I wanted was to get back to my family and finally relax. But the moment I stepped onto the platform, something felt off. The station was unnervingly quiet, far too quiet for a holiday night. It was as if the whole world had frozen still, leaving only me behind. I checked my watch. 11:30 p.m. The train wasn't supposed to leave until midnight, but it was already waiting at the platform. Its metal frame shuddered in the cold air. This wasn't the train I usually took. It looked old, vintage almost. The exterior was faded, streaked with rust, and the headlights flickered weakly. But I was too tired to care. The thought of getting home was enough to push me forward. I boarded the train without a second thought. The moment I stepped inside, a strange chill ran through me. The air was thick with the smell of old leather and metal. Dim bulbs flickered overhead, casting long, trembling shadows across the car. I quickly realized I was the only passenger. That's when I noticed the conductor. He stood at the front of the car, his back to me, staring out the window. His face was hidden in shadow, but his uniform, dark and old-fashioned, looked like something out of another time. I tried to ignore the unease crawling up my spine and sat by the window. The train began to move, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels oddly soothing at first. But the further we went, the colder it got. Despite the heating being on, I could see my breath misting in the air. Condensation on the windows formed strange, uneven shapes, like something pressing against the glass from the outside. The lights flickered again. At first I brushed it off, but then it happened more often, the train lurching every time as if it were struggling to keep moving. That's when I heard it. A faint sound. A child crying. It was distant, soft and muffled, but unmistakable. I froze. The car was empty, and the sound seemed to come from nowhere in particular. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe someone farther down the train, but the crying grew louder and sadder. It was no longer just a cry. It was a desperate, pleading sob. I stood up, heart pounding, and began walking toward the rear of the car. With every step, the air grew colder. The crying became clearer, closer. A cold draft brushed past me, almost like someone exhaling behind my neck. When I reached the back, the lights flickered and didn't come back on. The train plunged into darkness. All I could hear was the sound of that child sobbing in the dark. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light swept across the car and then froze on something. A small child sat in the far corner of the car. Her skin was pale, her dress old and faded, like something from the 1940s. Her face was hidden behind tangled hair. The moment the light touched her, she stopped crying. A cold wave washed over me. I took a hesitant step closer. The temperature dropped instantly, my breath turning into mist that lingered in the air. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. The train jolted violently. The lights flickered back on. The girl lifted her head, her eyes wide, empty, and staring straight at me. Before I could move, the train screeched to a stop, throwing me forward into a seat. When I looked up, she was gone. The car was empty again. I just sat there, frozen. The train didn't move. The lights flickered one more time, and then went out completely. That's when the crying returned, but this time, it wasn't just one child. It was many. Dozens of voices filled the air, echoing all around me, overlapping in a wave of grief and terror. It felt like the sound was coming from the walls, the floor, even the air itself. I could feel every hair on my body stand up. I ran toward the door to the next car, but before I reached it, I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold, firm. I spun around. No one was there. At the far end of the car, a figure stood in the shadows. It was the conductor. His skin was pale and stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were sunken and empty, and his mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "Not yet," he whispered. The lights went out again. The train lurched forward, the sound of grinding metal filling the air. It felt like an eternity before the lights flickered back on. When they did, everything looked normal. The train was moving smoothly again. Outside the window, there was only darkness and snow. And around me, the car was full. Passengers sat quietly in their seats, reading, chatting, smiling. Ordinary people, as if nothing had happened. The conductor was gone. The child was gone. But the cold lingered. When the train finally reached my stop, I bolted out as fast as I could. The platform was empty, completely deserted. No one else got off. I turned around just in time to see the train pulling away. But instead of heading toward the next station, it vanished into the blizzard. Gone. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I've searched every record, every timetable, but there's no mention of that train. No route, no conductor, nothing. I call it the Christmas Eve Massacre. And every year when Christmas Eve comes around, I can't help but wonder, will that train return? And if it does, will I be on it again? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe, and remember, some trains are better left unboarded.